and welcome to Things Are Getting Strange, an X-Files Rewatch podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Kim.
And I believe we have some degree of news from FileFest.
Yeah, if you want to go and sign up to FileFest now, they're currently having a drive because if they can get 200 more people to sign up and buy tickets, they're going to announce another 2 guests.
And they haven't given any hint of which 2 guests, but there's 2 immediately that spring to mind. But there's like 4 plausibly they don't have that they should.
I suppose it could still be any number of crew or writers.
True. Well, 5. Actually, I think there's 5 guests that we'd think would be there for a 30th anniversary who aren't there at the moment.
You're going for the larger ones like Mitch Pleggy, maybe?
Yeah, and David Duchovny, Gillian Anderson, William B. Davis, and Robert Patrick, if you could possibly convince him to do it. Which is seems
I
unlikely.
suppose so. I think their biggest ones so far, actor-wise, are probably Nicholas Lee, that's Kryzik, and Monica Reyes as actress, whose name's just escaped me, but... Gish. Annabeth Gish.
That's the one.
Yeah.
It's when they say it's 2 significant actors, it's a case of, well, you're either going to really make people really happy or disappoint them and say, yes, it's William B. Davis and Mitch Pileggi. And everyone goes, aww.
But yeah, we have no idea who these guests will be, but if you can all sign up if you haven't already, then we get to find out.
Yeah. We're living vicariously through you, the American participant of FileFest.
Oh, it should be noted, if, like us, you can't attend, they have just announced a store as well, which has some pretty neat t-shirts and other merch. Ooh. So you can still live vicariously by buying their 30th anniversary merch, even if you can't go to FileFest itself.
Fun times.
Yeah, I fancy getting myself a t-shirt. I think when payday rolls around, we'll treat ourselves to one of those.
Sounds good. Well, I'm wearing an X-Files t-shirt today.
Is that the one I got you for Christmas?
It is. It's my Jose Chung t-shirt.
It'll be relevant in a few episodes' time.
2, in fact.
Yeah.
Yeah, exciting. But for today, we have Syzygy. And Grotesque, but first Syzygy.
Yep.
I'm pronouncing that right, aren't I?
Yep, it's Syzygy. I looked it up.
We were hoping they were going to say it in the episode, but no such luck. Okay, Syzygy. Directed by Rob Bowman and written by Chris Carter. First broadcast on the 26th of Jan 1996. Guest stars. There's some interesting ones, obviously. So we've got Dana Wheeler Nicholson, who plays Angela White, or Detective White, as I think she's only ever referred to. We've seen her in Seinfeld.
Oh, that's where she's from.
There's Wendy Benson, who plays Margie Kleingen, who's been in Wishmaster.
Okay.
The other girl hasn't been anything of note at all, unfortunately.
The girl who played Terry, I think, is best known for the 70s show or something like that.
Yeah, but I'm not really familiar with that, so I didn't include it.
I think she's a fairly major character in that.
Yes, she's a main character, recurring one, but being not familiar with it, I decided to leave this off. But yeah, that's what she's best known for. There's Gabrielle Miller, who played Brenda J.C. Summerfield, who we previously saw in Our Town as the woman who fell into the chicken processing thing. And the opening sting, but mostly that one.
Paula, I think, in Our Town.
Paula, who has also been in Frasier. But blink and you miss him, and not listed as a guest star because it's not his first role, but it was very early on for him, is Ryan Reynolds, of all people, who played J. Boom da Boom. My God. Who has been in, and I didn't know he was in this one, Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle.
Yeah, he was.
Blade Trinity, The Amityville Horror, unavoidably.
The remake of Amityville
Horror. X-Men Origins Wolverine, lest we forget. The Green Lantern, obviously. The Croods. And very famously, of course, Deadpool, Deadpool 2, and Deadpool 3. He's also in Life, which was the Alien ripoff. On the space station.
I don't remember him being in Life.
Yeah.
Isn't that Jake Gyllenhaal? Presumably he's a different character in it.
The Hitman's Bodyguard. Detective Pikachu. In Scrubs. At one time.
Okay.
And so for slightly unusual ones for the things we've seen him in otherwise, he was in the music video to Threw It on the Ground by The Lonely Island.
Yeah, he was.
And got to be the weirdest one of the lot of these, he's in 3 honest trailers. Because he's in the Deadpool trailer, the Deadpool 2 trailer, and the Logan trailer.
That's neat. I think I'll note for this one as well is that it does recycle a lot of actors we've seen in other X-Files episodes. I think the most notable one is the Principal, because he's in 3 or 4 episodes, but it includes he's the captain in Endgame, I think, and he's also one of the scientists who get killed in Roland. And I've got a feeling he's in another episode as well, but I can't place him at this time. But, you only see him fleetingly as the principal of the high school, Bob, in this episode.
In New Hampshire, a group of high school students hold a eulogy for their dead friend, a reported victim of a local satanic cult. Two girls, Terry Roberts and Margie Kleinjan, get a ride home from a jock, J. Boom da Boom. The girls tell Boom that the cult seeks a blonde virgin as the next victim, and convince him to turn off the road. The next morning, the police find Boom hanging from a cliff. Out of sight and out of earshot of the police, Terry and Margie sit at the top of the cliff, laughing while plucking petals from a flower. Mulder and Scully arrive shortly afterwards, arguing over directions along the way. They meet local detective Angela White and go to Boom's funeral. Scully is in a bad mood and severely skeptical of all claims of occult involvement. Mulder is far more convinced. The high school principal, Bob Spitz, interrupts the funeral by ranting about satanic cults murdering their children when the coffin de Boom is in catches fire. The testimony for de Boom's murder came from Terry and Margie, and Mulder and Scully seek to interview each separately as they've previously been interviewed together. Both of them provide an identical story about a satanic ceremony. Scully thinks the stories are completely cliché and points out that no account of satanic conspiracy has been validated. Conducting an autopsy, Mulder and Detective White find a burn mark in the shape of a horned beast, while Scully says she does not recognise what they are talking about. Mulder goes to White to apologise for Scully's behaviour, and the two visit the local astrologist, Madame Zarinka, who claims the town's crazy behaviour is due to the rare planetary alignment of the planets Mars, Uranus, and Mercury. Terry and Margie watch basketball practice, and lust over one of the players, whose name's Scott. His girlfriend is fellow cheerleader Brenda. One of the players accidentally spills a drink on Terry and Margie, and they cause the basketball to bounce underneath the bleachers and allow it to close on him, killing him instantly. A town mob begins to search for mass graves in the woods and finds a bag belonging to the town paediatrician filled with bones, which Spitz assumes to belong to a child. The mob goes to see the doctor, who claims he sold the bag to Terry Roberts. The bones are revealed to belong to Terry's dog, Mr. Tippy. Scully is increasingly upset with Mulder when he makes a joke and tells him she will return to Washington. Margie and Terry celebrate their birthday, during which Brenda uses a Ouija board to find out who she will marry. The planchette reveals that she will be marrying Satan. Upset, Terry rushes to the bathroom and finds Margie and Terry chanting Bloody Mary in the bathroom and is locked in, killed by glass from a shattered mirror. Detective White heads to Mulder's motel room afterwards and attempts to seduce him. They are interrupted by Scully, who informs them of Brenda's death. Terry and Margie then try to console Scott, who rejects both of their advances. Terry is mad at Scott, but Margie is less adverse to his behaviour. Mulder returns to Madame Zarinka, who tells them the planets come into alignment like this once every 84 years, and additional alignments will cause everyone born on January 12th, 1979, which happens to be today's date and Margie and Terry's birthday, will have an abundance of cosmic energy. Margie goes to see Scott alone, but is interrupted by an angry Terry. The two argue and inadvertently end up killing Scott by causing the springs of the garage door to fly at him. Margie goes to Mulder and tells him Terry is responsible for the murders, while Terry seeks out Scully and tells her the opposite. The agents call each other and bring the girls to the police station, where the place begins to shake. Mulder locks both girls in a room together, and their power goes away once the clock strikes midnight. When the town mob and Detective White finally see Terry and Margie as the culprits, Spitz claims it was the work of Satan. Mulder and Scully return to Washington, arguing again over directions. Scully defiantly runs a stop sign. Mulder notifies her, but she tells him to shut up, which he does. This is one of the infamous episodes of The X-Files, I think.
I understand it's very divisive of fans as well, because Chris Carter, apparently his idea with this episode was to illustrate how Mulder and Scully would never become a couple, which when people have spent 2.5 seasons shipping Mulder and Scully, they weren't that receptive of at the time it came out.
No, and it's also really odd because as much as you're trying to sort of present Scully as being just, argumentative and sort of dismissive, you can't reject the fact that it very much feels like jealousy the whole way through.
Especially in the scenes where Mulder is very clearly hitting on the detective.
Yeah. And I think the other thing to sort of get out of the way straight away is this episode feels absolutely bizarre coming after D-Hande.
The other episode about a satanic cult.
Yes, and also coming straight after War of the Coprophages, which is also about mass hysteria, which this episode also plays into. Again, I know this is going to come up quite a lot, but I feel this episode is really badly orientated within the X-Files.
I think the mass hysteria more in this episode is we're trying to get across the feel of the Salem witch trials.
Yeah.
Is you've got the idea of the community rallying against 2 teenage girls.
Yeah, I think the problem is that the community has zero idea that the teenage girls are responsible until, 5 minutes before the end of the episode?
They're more fixated on a cult and initially the Doctor whose briefcase they find halfway through being responsible for this supposed slaughtering of unbaptized infants.
Yeah. And I think the other problem is that you start off with Mulder and Scully being out of character. And I think as an audience member, you immediately put onto the wrong foot. What did I miss last week? Because they're not acting right.
You've got horny Mulder versus really bitchy, sarcastic Scully.
Yeah, and you said that the book is slightly better on this in making clear that they know they're out of character.
It's less Scully, it's more from Mulder's perspective. For the record, the young adult novel of this one is called Bad Sign, and it's by Eaton Royce, which is Neil Shusterman's pen name. I think he's wrote a couple of the others before. But you particularly get into Mulder's head a lot, where it's more like Mulder's lost all his inhibitions and he can tell that what he's saying is wrong and he can't understand why he's saying this, but he's just kind of lost his filter.
Yeah, and he gets one line when Detective White comes into the motel room where he says, "I don't normally drink," and he sort of makes some vague comment about not acting normally. And that's the only time we get it.
The biggest one you see in the book is at the end when he calls Scully to say, I've got one girl here implicating the other, is he's very careful with how he words this because he's realised that Scully's out of character too and he needs to word it in a way that she isn't going to immediately get her back up. And then he words it wrong anyway and realises his mistake. That's when it particularly becomes clear in the book that Mulder realises that something's going on.
And that's not in the episode, really. I think it doesn't help that they're out of character, and that might be Chris Carter's point. And we've seen him be out of character in other episodes, but it's usually been the bad ones where someone's not understood something, like Excelsis Day being one of the more famous ones where they're just not in character for some reason.
Or like we said last week with Revelation, is when Mulder will offhandedly just close down if there's a religious explanation and it doesn't seem right for him.
Yeah, and in this one, he's seemingly really all in on the cult thing, but he's quoting FBI statistics to needle Scully, and it's really weird because what he's saying isn't wrong, but he's saying it basically to get at her.
I think the problem is it's very clearly supposed to be a satirical episode. In particular, it's things like Scully never driving. It's poking fun at the things that fans complained about a lot at the time. But it's just not as well written as one of the kind of blackly humorous episodes we've seen Darren Morgan do, like The Humbugs, Corophages, Clyde Bruckman.
Yeah.
So we've got another writer trying to emulate Morgan's writing style, but not quite getting why Morgan episodes are funny.
Yeah, and again, it's really bad to do this right after one of his.
It shows up even more glaringly because we've just had Corophages, which was really fun.
Yeah, but it also puts me in mind, oddly, of Darkness Falls, because that was Ice. Morgan and Warren wrote Ice and basically did the template for the secluded area where you're fighting the supernatural menace that can infect you in some way or kill you. And then Chris Carter wrote Darkness Falls, which is basically Ice Mark II. I was perfectly good.
I'd say better.
Yeah, and this time he seems to have said, I can write Raw the Coprophages again, and just nosedived. And apparently didn't understand anything.
It's weird. I do try to find the positives in this episode, and there are positives.
There are positives.
I think at first the growing mystery with the two girls, particularly when you get like the bleachers scene and stuff like that, is, alright, this is dark, this is nasty, what's going on here? And it does a really good way of portraying these kind of way that girls were in the 90s. They're very believably 90s girls, which seems really, really cliche now. But at the time, it's like, yep, that's it, that's a teenage girl in the 90s.
Yeah, I'd say they got it across very well. I think the corollary to that, though, is their powers are so all over the place. because there's no sense of what they can and can't do.
Other than the fact that they're evidently growing stronger up until this nexus.
Yeah, but you don't really get the sense of them getting more powerful because they clearly have psychokinetic powers by the end.
Mm.
But that presumably isn't how they hung Ryan Reynolds at the start. Or doesn't feel like that's how they did it. And then they close the bleachers and then they sort of do the stuff with the springs in the garage.
And the Bloody Mary one with the exploding mirror.
Yeah. I actually will say, I thought, the Bloody Mary bit's one of my highlights for the episode. It's just Brenda walking into the bathroom and they're just standing there saying, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. She said, what are you doing? Oh, well, if you can't say Bloody Mary to the mirror 5 times. Yeah, this is the kind of thing I wanted from this episode.
I
More
quite like the Ouija board bit before that with the
Yes.
planchette spelling out Satan. Brilliant. Yeah.
But I think it's the way it's framed, though, is really odd because you see them at the party and Brenda and Terry are dancing up a storm while everyone else is kind of sat around watching them going, what the hell are these two doing? And then you cut to the other room where they're doing the planchette stuff. And you don't get a sense of... There's no Terry and Margie being the masterminds at the centre of the party influencing things. It's kind of, they're off in one corner, the Ouija board's in the other. It happens to say Satan.
There's a cute moment in the book that I like that comes, I think, just after Scott's death or just before it, where it must be after, come to think of it from the way it's worded, but the girls suddenly realise the problems with what they've done is that essentially they've become so jaded and murdered every hot guy in the school when their goal was to get the hottest guy and all the rest of it. It's like oh hell, now we're only left with all the ugly ones. It's just a very, very teenage girl mentality in there.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the problems is, realistically, Mulder and Scully are incidental to the fun parts of the episode. They're actually kind of, they drag down everything, whereas you want to see... I don't think we see enough of Terry and Margie, really.
I just thought their bits increasingly get more and more mean-spirited, and I didn't enjoy watching them that way.
No. So, I understand we're on a whole Scully is skeptic ever since 731, and that's fine. But in this one, it's the lack of flexibility she has is incredibly frustrating. Whereas Mulder's also frustrating, given he's needling her every opportunity he has.
It's added to that is Mulder's loss of inhibitions comes across as losing his professionalism. So it's the bit when they're all standing around discussing a potential satanic cult and mass murders of teenagers, and he's saying, who's wearing my favourite perfume?
Yeah. What?
Guys?
Again, so I understand that the planetary conjunction is affecting them, but it's given we start with them out of character, I think we need to see them start normally and then shift into these other characterizations of them as the episode went. I think there's a comment from Duchovny, actually, of how we distinguish in episodes, whereas you've got the comedy ones who are out of character and we've got the serious ones who are in character. And you kind of want to say, yeah, but this one's not like that. This is because the comedy episodes play up aspects of Mulder and Scully's characters, but they don't shift them out of their normal routines, do they?
No.
Whereas this one is, you've just turned them both into jerks, and it's very tiresome.
Yeah, I know humour is entirely subjective, and I can tell they're trying to be funny, but for me it was a miss. It just all fell flat.
Yeah, and there's weird stuff like the Keystone Cops, which we found in the X-Files game as a nod to Syzygy, bizarrely.
Yeah, I didn't realise that when we started playing, but it is that same scene you see on loop in Syzygy as well.
Just think, if they'd got the rights to use the Clockwork Orange, we might be seeing that in the X-Files game instead.
I imagine then the end sequence would have had to be to the tune of Beethoven and not to the saber dance.
Yeah. I think, well, I know why you do it for TV shorthand, but it's one of those slightly frustrating things when you do filmic things about specific cosmic events, is that you've got a clock that's perfectly in sync with the universe.
I've got to question this as well, because this Syzygy is a planetary alignment.
Yeah.
The Syzygy's been building and the energies have been converging, she says, for months, and we're just getting to the next now. But 1 second passes midnight and it all goes away.
Yeah, it's too convenient and it's too convenient.
Did you know that kind of alignment would be physically impossible as well?
I did not. Doesn't surprise me, really.
It's to do with the placement of the moon, as you couldn't have a full moon and Mercury in the sky at the same time.
Okay.
So therefore, the way we see the alignment in the episodes, added to the fact that Uranus is invisible from Earth, but with the naked eye anyway, is you couldn't have had the planets lining up in the sky in that way. I don't know if that's an intentional goof or not, but there you go.
Could go either way on that one. But yeah, I think doing an episode involving mass hysteria, even if your focus is more on the satanic cult thing, which again, D-Hander did better, and let's not be around the bush, funnier, even though D-Hander isn't really meant to be as a comedy episode, it is really funny from a completely black humour kind of aspect.
I think D-Hander does it nicely with the kind of mundane cult, where they're talking about just typical, school administration things, and then they have like the black prayer at the end of the meeting.
Exactly. I think Morgan and Wong understood you can't do satanic cult straight. It's going to seem really weird. What if we just flipped on its head so they're normal people who happen to be Satanists? Whereas this is mass hysteria, worried about a satanic cult. I think the other problem that, Daboom is meant to be the latest victim because they have the eulogy for the kid at the start. And we don't really get into Terry and Margie's why they've murdered everyone else.
I think the book notes that Daboom is actually the fourth. There have been 3 other boys that they murdered, all in different ways, because one was a drowning, I remember. So there were things that could have been taken as suicides or accidents.
Yeah.
But you've got to assume it's much like the kid with the bleachers and the hate him, wouldn't want to date him, they keep thing, is that every time one of these boys offends them, they respond by murdering him.
Yeah. It just...
Boom, however, I'm not sure how he even offends them, because they kind of, even though he's mourning his friend, convince him to pull off the road and have sex with them, the planetary alignment perhaps affecting his judgment, and he does it. He doesn't reject them or anything like that.
I know, it does, yeah, in retrospect, it's a case of, why did you kill him? Because you were coming on to him. He's Ryan Reynolds.
And he reciprocates. Even though he kind of gives them a bit of a funny look at first, when they suggest sex, he just pulls right off that road.
Yeah, so we're really, unless he's unbelievably bad at sex or something, they've killed him for this, we have no idea. And it just feel weird that we have that comment afterwards of they interviewed both girls together and they spanned the satanic cult story, then interviewed them separately, and it's been the same cult story. It's not different enough from D-Hander again, but it's not presented in the same way as D-Hander, where D-Hander was sort of like so grotesquely over the top it became funny.
I thought Scully's dismissiveness was kind of interesting, where she kept talking about there being no evidence of satanic cults. And it's fair enough, the girls' memories of the child sacrifice and stuff in D-Hander never happened. But it was a satanic cult that they had evidence of, and Scully knows about it, and we just seem to have forgotten it.
Well, yes, and the unanswered question at the end of the episode of who or what was Miss Paddock, and what did that message on the blackboard mean at the end?
This could have been the return of Miss Paddock.
It could, and I think that's a real shame that they didn't take the opportunity to bring back a great monster of the week.
Miss Paddock could have become like your Gaunter Dim, the recurring demonic character that is so unthinkably powerful, and you can just try and prevent damage mitigate rather than stop her.
Yeah, I mean, presumably at this point, we were trying not to just redo or do sequels to old episodes. I mean, Tombs and Squeeze notwithstanding, nothing else has sort of picked up on the previous episode except for the conspiracies so far.
True.
So presumably that was still the thinking of... But then I also wonder if they didn't realise they were veering back into the same territory that D-Hander had already done.
There are some startling similarities with D-Hander, though I will go back again, as D-Hander is one of the better Monster of the Week episodes we've seen so far, and this one is a pale shadow of it.
Yes. Very, very frustrating. I mean, there are bits and pieces of the humour that do work. I mean, I quite like the psychic who is going to check Mulder's card will go through before she tells him anything.
She was a really fun character. And the being reluctant to tell him anything at first because she just assumes he's trying to pin things on her.
Yeah, exactly. It's like those little moments, and it's kind of odd there are like 2 dead pet jokes in this episode, which feels a bit mean-spirited as well.
The cat and Mr. Tippy.
Yeah. And I really don't get why the doctor subplot, the pediatrician stuff is in here. Because the dog contains the remains of Terry's dog, which she buried in the bag she bought from him like a year earlier. And he's remembered he sold it to her as well. That they buried in this field. And we get that whole short loop of they think it's children's bones and child sacrifice and everything else. And then that's dismissed. I don't know why we had this.
You do get the short visual reference to help you see that this is affecting people wider, is when the doctor comes to the door, he's wearing, like, women's negligee.
Yeah.
So I guess that's your idea of the kind of planetary alignment affecting people's inhibitions and stuff like that. But it's just a fleeting glance, and if you blinked, you would have missed it as well.
Yeah, it feels really extraneous, and I don't know why it's in here.
Other than to show that this effect is literally affecting everyone, but you've kind of got that from, like, the crazy townsfolk mob already.
Yeah. I suppose then, if you put it that way round, it's... You don't have a decline of people's cognitive, do you? Basically, certain people start off basically completely going mad, but everyone else seems to be operating normally until you get right next to the end, where in case everyone starts going a bit strange. But even in the end, the police in the police station are doing their jobs.
You might, and I'm reading between the lines, which I shouldn't do because this really should be in the episode, is you've got the idea in astronomy that the kind of circumstances of your birth are really important. So it could be that, people who are Aries are being affected worse by this, or, any number of things depending on the alignment of the planets when you were born. Because, there's the whole idea where astronomers work out, based on the exact date and time of your birth, what celestial bodies would have been in alignment, and that's supposed to affect your personality. Is maybe that's why you've got to the level of Terry and Margie are the absolute worst, because this is the exact planetary alignment that's kind of given them almost godlike powers just for this limited time. Whereas you've got ripples and degrees moving out from that.
Yeah. What I would say about the godlike powers is, I suppose, in one way you could read it as teenagers not really understanding what they've got. On the other hand, they don't seem confused about any of their abilities, do they? They seem to be very cognizant of what and how they can do things.
They also seem to be utterly remorseless. There's not really any doubt until Scott's killed and they turn on each other. And then the final episode, when their powers instantly go that second out of midnight, when they suddenly become scared, crying teenagers again.
Yeah. It's just, as I think you noted at the time, it's just another draft, maybe, or actually I think another 3 drafts we needed on this one.
I think this one needs more than one draft, to be honest. It's a bit all over the place.
And I think it possibly, as I know you're fond of for later on, is we need to rework it so it's from the monster's perspective rather than Mulder and Scully. They need to take a back seat in this one.
It's not something X-Files has really gone on at this point, is to have episodes from the monster's
But
perspective.
It will. We know that it will later.
Yeah, it does eventually get there, but I think this is an episode that could have potentially benefited from that.
Yes, we need more about Margie and Terry and what they're doing and how they're doing it.
You need to be in their heads.
Yeah. Oh, but basically we need it to be, like how Final Destination is written, given that's... We'll get to Final Destination, or at least the original script of Final Destination eventually, where if once you know that it once was an X-Files script, you suddenly go, oh my god, that one's Mulder and that one's Scully.
Yeah.
It's blatantly obvious, but they take such a backseat in the film. That's how you would have done that in an episode. Even though I know the original script for Flight 8 something or other.
I can't remember the name of the script.
It's got some weird focus that Final Destination has cut down completely.
I have a copy of that script, actually. At some point we will, I think, have to watch Final Destination and then look at the script alongside it.
Yeah. And then if people want us to, we can go on to the other Final Destinations, which have nothing to do with the X-Files.
They're varying degrees of magnificence, though.
But it is still amusing that James Wong was the director of Final Destination.
Yes. I also think I should give negative marks into anything that kills off a cat, personally.
I would agree with you there. I mean, it feels really unnecessary. I mean, we've got satanic panic kind of stuff, but we introduce the cat and then murder the cat.
I think my biggest problem with the episode, outside of Mulder and Scully, as we've talked about being entirely miscast, is just that we've missed an opportunity to focus on the girls more.
Yes.
Is you've got this idea of best friends throughout the episode. The idea that bestest best friends stick together. And all the rest of it is that they've essentially become partners in crime because they are both best friends, they both believe in each other inherently, and neither would throw the other one under the bus until the point they do so.
Yeah, I suppose that is also part of why I want the episode to focus on them, because they're basically treated as a single unit up until that confrontation with Scott where he rejects them, and one of them sort of just blows him straight off, the other one just pauses.
But because of that, it's hard to analyse the characters, because they are Margie and Terry, all one word. It's not two individuals. I think my counterpoint for doing this better would be something like the Heathers.
Yes.
Where all of the girls have distinct personalities, they've all got autonomy, is you think of them at first as being the mean cliche of bad girls, but they split out as the course goes, and you kind of encounter them all individually and discover their quirks.
Yeah, Heathers is probably the best comparison, which also, Heathers is a knowing black comedy and really plays into the black part of black comedy. And this doesn't.
It should be noted as well that the Heathers has aged well. It's still a really good film. This hasn't so much.
No.
This is incredibly, incredibly 90s. It's very cheesy. It feels really, really cliched when rewatching it now, years later. Which is something that you can sometimes level on teen things, but the best ones kind of have evaded this sort of feel to them.
Well, that's maybe think around me again of Clockwork Orange, because Clockwork Orange, of course, he used Russian slang to try and make sure it didn't age in the same way.
It's called Nadsat in Clockwork Orange itself. Me and my droogs went out for a glass of the old Moloko with the knives in, woke up with a pain in the Gulliver.
Exactly. Gives it a timeless feel that you wouldn't get if you used actual slang. So, and to be fair to Syzygy, it doesn't use much in the way of actual slang of the 90s that I can think of.
Hate her, hate him, wouldn't want to date him.
I don't hear anyone who's ever said that in real life.
No, it's true, but it's a very, very 90s baby Ryan thing. It's like KSSING.
Yeah. I think the weird thing is I remember them saying it more. They only say it like twice.
They say it a couple times in the episode, and then there's the time with Scott where one of them tries to evoke the hate him and the other one doesn't bite.
But I think they should have said it at the start rather than he loves me not, which actually feels... If this is a consistent thing they do, you'd think it'd be the same all the way through. The sting feels out of place.
I think it's a nicely malicious way that they're picking their targets as well, is they play a kind of slightly seedy game while they're watching the basketball where they're essentially rating the boys.
Yeah.
And it's when you get to the one where they both agree hate him, that they then instantly execute, essentially. Should be noticed that scene is absolutely brutal in the book as well. The bleachers scene is nowhere near as quick. It's quite prolonged in the book, and it's one of those ones where you think, for young audiences, why have we gone with this? But
I think the other thing, though, is I suppose it accurately depicts teens because it's not a deep-seated objection to the guy they kill. It's simply because he spilled drinks on them. It's not an inherent, we don't like him. But you've made me think a minute there of how they're picking their victims. But they're going after the boys, and they kill one girl over the course of this episode.
Because they want her boyfriend.
Yeah. But surely, if the other victims have been football players, they would pretty much probably have girlfriends. So shouldn't the list of deaths be teenage girls who they happen to have a crush on their boyfriend?
From the way teenage girl mentality works is, I think you'd be more likely to go for other girls as well, because, speaking from experience, girls are mean, and girls bear grudges, and fall out all the time within their little friendship groups and things like that. A generalisation, of course, and going back to my own teen years in the 90s, but I think I would have been more likely to target the girls in my class than the boys if I was suddenly given godly smiting powers.
Exactly, so you do get the impression that Chris Carter's dabbled in the subject area he doesn't know much, if anything, about, and this is part of why the episode doesn't work, is he does not understand 90s teenagers at all.
To be fair, I wouldn't really expect a adult man writing in the 90s to understand 90s teenagers. I've got the understanding because I was a teenage girl in the 90s.
Exactly, so I don't know why he decided to do this. Other than he wanted to ape Darren Morgan, apparently, and just... Actually, no, I think you've got a quote from Chris Carter which says an awful lot about his attitude to this, and it's one of those, oh, don't say that.
Yes, I did find an interesting quote for this, and I don't like to criticize Chris Carter directly for this, but it's the kind of thing that you shouldn't say when you're responding to criticism. Is he retorted when I think he was expecting people to like this episode a lot more than he did, and it actually got a lot of negative criticism back when it was released. But he retorted saying that he had sprinkled satirical elements throughout the episode that he thinks that people just hadn't understood. So it's always the whole, Chris, if one person says they don't get your episode, it's probably on them. If multiple critics are saying this hasn't worked, it's probably on your writing, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me very much of Anne Rice retorting to negative reviews one time, saying people haven't sufficiently interrogated the themes of the novel. Because you can't say that to your audience.
I always think when I'm looking at reviews of things before I decide to read them or not as well, if you have one person who dislikes it, probably fine.
Yeah.
If you've got, 50% or more people saying this is bad, you should be listening to those negative criticisms.
Yeah.
You always have to look at taste as well. As I find it, I'm a huge fan of horror movies, but you often find that cerebral horror movies have a lot of naysayers, because you get the different camps. As people will watch your likes of the smarter ones, your Jacob's Ladder, your Session 9, Skinamarink, that sort of thing, and they will have gone in expecting gore.
Yes.
And because they don't get their gore, they say, oh, this is a bad horror movie, it wasn't scary. And you've not... I think Session 9's a great one for this because it's so underrated, is it sticks with you. It lives rent-free in my head now. I've watched Session 9 lots of times. It's incredibly unsettling, but it's not gory. And therefore you have this whole subset of people who will view it as being a bad film because of that.
Well, I can never not think of the people from the League of Gentlemen. So how many murders in this? Well, 7. Oh, that's rubbish then, isn't it?
Yeah. So you evoked Black Christmas before, is there are a lot of people who are fans of the remake because it's horribly violent. It's nowhere near as good as the original. No. The one thing you can say about it really is it's horribly violent.
And I will have to correlate that with the first remake, because we're actually quite fond of the second remake.
But to bring that back to this episode, again, this one of all the X-Files episodes probably had the most mixed and polarised reviews I've ever seen, which I think goes down to as well as viewers' preference, is this episode really spoke to some people. They found it really funny. They liked the playoff between Mulder and Scully with their vastly skewed personalities, and it worked for them and it got blindingly positive reviews. And you have the equal number on the opposite end of the scale who it just fell flat from, and therefore they despise the episode.
And we are quite firmly in the latter camp.
Yeah, I try to find the positive thing to say, and I can see the subjectiveness of this, but I don't like it. And I've tried and split out the good things of so many episodes, and I've struggled with this one. I just don't like it.
I still find it hilarious that Chris Carter apparently was trying to make sure that Sculder didn't happen, and yet somehow has boosted it. I mean, they may be sniping at each other, but it's still there.
It seems a weird idea to pander to fans as well by having all these little in-jokes for them, like the Scully's feet not readjusting the pedals was apparently a joke he once made at a convention when somebody questioned him why she never drove. And I want to note she does drive in Clyde Bruckman. But,
and Fresh Bones.
Yep. Yep, indeed. But then at the same time, it seems really weird when you've got this whole subset of people who are just shipping them and really want to see them together and like the kind of niceness, the Red Museum, him wiping her lips and cute little scenes like that. And then him to say, "Haha, no, it will never happen. Here's the evidence." Well, how can you not see that this would alienate people?
I know, it's... I understand to a point. Because I remember in the 90s, this was very up in the air. There was a lot of will they, won't they. Some people felt on both sides of it. And the fact the X-Files went for so long before really playing into it was seen as a positive for many people. Because not a lot of things in the 90s, if you had the will they, won't they situation, it resolves halfway through season 1. At the end of season 1, it's been done by now. And the X-Files was hanging on longer.
At the very least, they would have had a kiss or something by now.
Yeah, there would have been something, and then something would have pulled them apart again.
Mm.
So, in that sense, I can understand why he doesn't want to do it, because it was very cliche. At the same time, as you said, you don't alienate a fan base by saying not going to happen.
So you have the John Steed effect and just have the sex appeal there and just, it's the elephant in the room at all times.
The Avengers, which again, we should note, was actually an influence on the X-Files, traded on the forbidden relationship aspect of it for however many seasons the Emma Peel stage of the Avengers lasted, given that was just fraught friction the entire way, held back with the whole, her husband might be alive, therefore we can't go any further. And they got so much out of that. I mean, I can imagine there were shippers back in the 60s and they just wanted it to go that way, and, you know, the constant on edge would have been frustrating, but it kept it all fresh.
Yeah.
And you can have the constant flirting, and you never have to cross the line where basically the relationship fundamentally alters. Chris, you're wrong, sorry.
I think given that we're going out of our way not to actually talk about the episode itself, that maybe we don't have so much to say on this one.
We should we move on to the other episode where we'll have some comments.
I feel I've got more on Grotesque, I must admit.
That's fair. Okay, so we also watched Grotesque. Directed by Kim Manners, written by Howard Gordon, first broadcast on the 2nd of February 1996. Guest stars. There's some interesting people again.
Oh, yeah.
So, first off, we have Kurtwood Smith, who played Bill Patterson, who was Mulder's former... No, he's not actually Mulder's former or anything. He's a bigwig in the FBI. One of his best-known roles is RoboCop, where he's the leader of the gang who kills Murphy at the start. He's also been in Rambo 3.
Okay.
He was in Star Trek 6, and you wouldn't have known it unless you read the credits.
Fair enough.
Well, he's the Federation president, who they tried to assassinate at the end of the film.
Okay, yeah.
But he's in heavy makeup, he's not wearing glasses, so yeah. He's in Under Siege 2, he's in Broken Arrow, Deep Impact, Amityville The Awakening. I can't remember which one that is.
I've seen so many of them.
Oh, I think that might be the prequel one, and he's the abusive dad of Ryan Reynolds' character.
Oh, okay.
I think that's that one.
That one's just called the Amityville Horror, that's not Awakening.
Oh, it's not horror, okay. No idea then. It's one of them. He's been in D69. He was in Third Rock from the Sun.
Oh, okay.
Malcolm in the Middle and House. We also have Lavani, and I'm very sorry, Ochnelevichi as John Mostow, who was in Wishmaster 2, in Virus, he was in Blade, he's in Millennium, and he's in Independence Day.
So he said he was in Virus?
He was in Virus.
Poor man.
But also there's Greg Thurloway as Agent Greg Nemhauser, who will show up again in Season 4 in Sanguinarium, of all things.
Oof.
And he was also in Sliders.
Okay.
So would you like to give us a synopsis for Grotesque?
Our episode this time opens at George Washington University, where a group of artists are sketching a nude male model. We see that one of the artists, who is John Mostow, is not actually drawing the model, but is instead drawing a demonic creature. He uses his utility knife at one point to sharpen his pencil and cuts his finger, and continues frantically smearing blood onto his charcoal drawing. After the session, the model reaches his car to find that the keyhole has been blocked with a small charcoal pencil. He's then attacked and killed by someone who we don't see. The next morning, Mostow is arrested when the FBI raid his studio, which is also his apartment. The task force is led by Agent Bill Patterson, who very quickly finds a utility knife, the same one used in the murder the previous day, which is covered in the victim's blood. Mulder and Scully very quickly become involved in the investigation, although it doesn't initially seem to be an X-file, because Patterson actually requests Mulder's assistance. They head to the prison to interview Mostow, who is revealed to be an immigrant from Uzbekistan, who has a history of involuntary commitment, and has been charged by killing 7 men now, each by mutilating their faces in a very signature way. Mostow insists that he was not responsible for the killings, but was possessed by a demonic being at the time. He's very vague as to the nature of this being, but it's heavily inferred that it is the devil. Mostow draws a picture of a gargoyle inside his cell and claims that this is the creature that made him kill. As the agents meet with Patterson, they learn that his relationship with Mulder is tense, and he's very sceptical of Mulder's theories, making it questionable why he wanted Mulder to be involved in the first place. Mulder and Scully head over to Mostow's studio, where they very quickly discover a hidden room that is full of gargoyle sculptures. When they investigate these closer, they discover each one is a dismembered corpse covered in clay. While Mostow has been imprisoned, another 2 people are attacked. One is off screen towards the start of the episode. The second is a glassblower who actually survives and is hospitalised, although it's left very vague as to whether or not he will survive his severe facial injuries. Scully discusses the case with Nemhauser, another agent who is involved, and discovers that Patterson may be very, very critical of Mulder in person, but was actually very complimentary of him behind the scenes, and there may be other reasons why he's been involved in the investigation. Scully also notices that Nemhauser has a bandaged wound on his wrist, which was caused when Mosto bit him. Patterson later finds Mulder in the library sculling gargoyles and expresses a deep disappointment in him, claiming that he's also researched into this in the past and it's a dead end. Scully heads over to Mulder's apartment and finds that it's absolutely covered by Mosto's drawings. She begins to worry that Mulder may be getting in too deep, taking Patterson's teachings, which believe that to understand a killer you've got to understand his art, so basically get into his head, to heart. Mulder has also begun sleeping in Mosto's studio and has begun sculpting a gargoyle himself. He awakens one night to find a figure with a gargoyle-like face standing over him. Mulder gives chase, but he is attacked and his face is slashed by a utility knife. He refuses to explain to Scully what's going on in his head or why he was in the studio. Scully confronts Patterson over this, who tells her not to stop Mulder from doing what he's doing because she won't be able to. Mulder goes to visit Mosto in prison again, who refuses to tell him how to find the creature that attacked him. Later, Scully finds a disassembled utility knife at the latest crime scene with Mulder's prints on it. She discovers it is actually the original murder weapon that has been missing from the evidence room. She also meets with Skinner and discovers that he's also worried about the way Mulder has been behaving. Mulder has a nightmare about being attacked by a gargoyle that is really himself, and wakes up and goes to Mosto's studio again, finding a severed arm that was not there previously. Scully gets a message to call Nemhauser, but when she rings the number back, his phone is answered by Mulder. Mulder has found it at the studio and realises that Nemhauser is probably the source of the severed arm, something that's quickly discovered when he finds Nemhauser's body inside a new sculpture. He denies to Scully that he took the knife, and Scully hurries over to find him before anything bad could happen. Mulder is very quickly confronted by Patterson, who seems somewhat disorientated and not sure how he arrived in the studio. Mulder quickly deduces that Patterson is the new killer. This is all based on his 3-year obsession with Mosto, and the fact that he requested Mulder to investigate the case, hoping that Mulder would be the one to catch him, albeit subconsciously. Mulder also notes that Patterson has clay all over his hands, and this is the thing that finally cracks Patterson, as he has no idea how it got there. As Scully arrives, they pursue a fleeing Patterson. Mulder fights, and Mulder perceives Patterson as turning into a demonic gargoyle creature, but he manages to shoot Patterson, who is then apprehended. In the final scenes of the episode, we see Patterson pressed against the bars of his cell, much in the way Mostow was, screaming and pleading that he didn't kill anyone. The camera focuses on a gargoyle that he has drawn in blood on the back wall. The ending episodes with a narrative from Mulder that concludes that Patterson drove himself insane because he got too deeply into the killer's head. However, Mulder cannot account for the monster he saw while he was fighting him.
Thank you. You found the inspiration for this episode, which we always like to see the inspirations, but this one was oh, Mr. Gordon, really?
Yeah, the inspiration this time is Howard Gordon saw a gargoyle.
Cool. I mean, we're miles away from Vince Gilligan's I've been observing my shadow and thought about what if it was an evil, all-consuming black hole shadow or something, to just, I saw a gargoyle and tried to make it about that. I mean, I said to you, there was the weird thing about one of the ideas behind Ghostbusters, the first one, was it was going to be based on all the statues and landmarks around Manhattan, which is why you get a lot of shots of statues and things.
Yeah, we had a trip to New York a few years ago, and it's surprising how much Gothic architecture there is.
I don't know if it's all really effective film, but as a visual thing that Ghostbusters has going for it, it works. And I don't know, I can't really sort of pin down how it works, but it kind of feeds into the whole Gozer stuff at the end and the opening of the Spirit Gate and everything else. And that all works. And this episode doesn't have anything like that. We get like a few shots of actual gargoyles and that's it.
Apparently the opening scene was supposed to take place in a Catholic hospital, but they couldn't convince the hospital to let them affix a fake gargoyle to the outside wall, which is why it became a university instead.
Sure, why not?
I think I'm going to go with the positive from the start of this one is, I like the feel of the episode. I think that, as we've said before, it's one that could have maybe done with another draft or so, and it could have been a really, really good episode. But I like the kind of almost detective noir feel it's got going for it. It's surprisingly dark and gritty, especially given the last few episodes we've had.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel focused properly, does it?
Elaborate.
I mean, it feels like it's got things it's kind of implying, but then drops. So, like, when you in your synopsis said the bite on Patterson's hand feels like a transmission vector for how it's got to him.
I think it's entirely you're supposed to be suspecting that Nemhauser is the killer and not Patterson.
Oh, Nemhauser's hand, sorry, yeah. But it's that kind of, you want there to be, because other X-Files episodes do it where there's some kind of clear reason why the next victim has become the next victim. Or the next killer has become the next victim. And this one's the whole, Nemhauser's red herring is actually Patterson.
I think you're supposed to be thinking along the lines of Shapes, where the kid that's mauled becomes the next werewolf.
Yeah, and I think the problem with Shapes was, at no point are you actually in any kind of debate about who's going to be the werewolf. Okay, oh, he was mauled while fending off that mountain lion. Well, he's the werewolf.
But in the same one this time, you've got a guy who says he's possessed by the devil, potentially, and he's bitten someone else, so maybe that guy could be the next devil man.
Yeah, and then at no point do you get Nemhauser does nothing suspicious the entire time until he gets killed. And Patterson is, if you remember RoboCop, you're looking at him going, well, you killed Murphy, so I don't know if I'm going to trust you. I feel like the kid from Last Action Hero, actually.
Oh, he killed Mozart.
It's suddenly Harry, he killed Mozart. Who? Very well watched teenager there, apparently, in Last Action Hero. But anyway. Again, I think it's just another draft, another two drafts. Just, there's a good idea in here, it's just not executed properly. And a lot of the praise for the episode, if you read the reviews, it's all praising Duchovny's acting rather than anything else about the episode.
Which is really good.
He is really good. It's just, what if you're actually interested in anything else, the episode feels bitty and kind of incomplete.
There are a few bits where I noticed watching it and also reading it. This one has a book as well that is called Grotesque. It's by Ellen Schreiber, who wrote quite a few of the others, including, I think, Shadows, that we've looked at previously, and maybe Oubliette. But the book in particular, I noticed, because I read it before we watched the episode, that there were some inconsistencies in the story. And I watched the episode thinking, oh, is this a mistake in her writing? And no, they're in there too. The two most jarring for me is we're told very early on that the signature facial mutilations, excuse the gore, is essentially he slashes both cheeks and pokes the eyes out. But then when we see the guy who survives, he's still got his eyes. So, and Scully even says standing over him, it's, he's got the signature facial mutilations. Like, but he doesn't.
No.
In any way. And the other one is when the guy is in the room, he changes his story, which fair enough, Mosto is absolutely insane. Is at first he says something about the creature that has possessed him, it's something that all men know and it will bring them to heel and all the rest of it, inferring it's the devil possessing him. And that's what he says he's drawing. But then when they talk to Patterson outside, Patterson says, oh, did you hear him? He says he draws that devil to protect himself. It's like, that's literally not what he's just said.
It's a recurring problem we've had with the episodes. I mean, Excelsis Day springs to mind of Fearful Symmetry, where you've completely changed your mind about what's going on about halfway through the episode, and you're not going to apologise for the fact you've changed your mind of what's going on. You're just going to run with it, and if you're paying attention, you're going, that's not how this started.
Yeah. It just struck me as, in the editing process, that if you'd had one more draft, you would have maybe picked out these inconsistencies.
Yeah, and things like the glassblower guy, he feels utterly irrelevant to the episode, other than there's another victim, which can't be Marstall's because he's in prison. But other than that, he doesn't contribute anything.
You got to say that a lot of these victims probably weren't Mosto's, because I think they said he'd been in prison a week, but then when they find the secret room, all the clay's still wet.
Yeah.
So I don't know why they don't pick up on this earlier, as it's got to be a second guy.
Yeah, at minimum. And I think the other thing, obviously, is, okay, so they didn't find the room during the initial raid. Fair enough, I suppose, but
it's well hidden.
It's well hidden, but also doesn't look readily accessible, like anyone's been in there for a while, despite the wet clay. So you've got some weird stuff going on there. Unless there's another way into it.
I suppose we don't really see the full scope of the room. Is the door they use looks like it's been sealed over.
Yeah.
But
It
can
can't
only
be.
have been sealed over super recently in that case because the clay would dry faster than that.
Yeah.
Other than the fact you get the nice dramatic scenes, which they do a few times where they peel the clay back and you see a dead person's face underneath.
I would be very surprised if that wasn't one of the operative ideas they had for the episode. So gargoyles, people in clay sculptures. That sounds great. We haven't really come up with the reason why they're in the clay sculptures. Because that's an awful lot of effort. And also, human bodies, as implied by other things like, we watched Tucker and Dale last night, and there's a whole comment about how just the lower half of a person is really heavy.
Yeah.
So he's got to have braced these things upright, modelled the clay over them, and not used like any supports or anything in order to get them into these clay sculptures.
A lot of those clay sculptures are busts, so they are missing their limbs at least.
True, but the head weighs a ton.
I imagine the torso as well must be heavy.
And so, like, you've done clay modelling. When you get to a certain size, you have to have things to support things, don't you? You have to brace things with wires and other things.
Yeah, that's why you'd make armatures.
Yeah. And they do it in this episode, do they? They just sort of each seem to put clay over them and they say, oh, that's fine. It's wet clay as well, so it's not finished it off and then halfway through the body's just gone and full of back out.
It's all the logistics of House of Wax.
Yeah. I understand why he's skimming across that, but at the same time, you've got an episode about art and this tortured artist, and you have this repeated thing about looking into his art, but he's so single-minded and just doing the same image over and over again, you don't get a sense of his art, because there's no point where he's gone screaming into just drawing the devil image, is there? That's all he's ever drawn, as far as we can see.
It's all you see in his studio, certainly.
Yeah. So, but again, that feels like a missed opportunity of, this is what he used to do, then he reached this critical point where this thing infected him, or he became possessed by it, and that's altered his perception of the world.
You're assuming he is possessed by something as well.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Because I took a lot of... I know it's happening to Mulder, this is Mulder's Irresistible. Is only Mulder sees Patterson in particular in the form of the devil.
That's true.
And in Irresistible, we debated, indeed with our dear friends on Twitter kind of helping with our debate here, is if Scully actually saw the devil or if this was just symbolic. And I think you kind of have the same feel here for Mulder.
Fair point.
Is that might not actually be a gargoyle, that might just be seeing Patterson for how he is on the inside.
True, but I get the impression that Mostow used to do different things, and then he became fixated.
You got a kind of Pickman's model sort of idea going for him.
Yeah, but we never get a sense of, he has changed in his attitude, because even if he is completely delusional, and Patterson is also delusional, and Mulder becomes partly delusional, a lot of people become delusional in very close proximity to each other for a potentially non-supernatural episode.
I feel you could have the fulcrum there of... It's a very Lovecraftian ideal, but the thing they've seen that's driven them to insanity it's a really weird thing, but there is a manga spin-off for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure called Ronan at the Louvre, where it all focuses on a painting that people die when they behold it, so it's in the Louvre's archive and nobody goes there. Because you never get a clear view as the reader of what this thing is, but what it sees what people see kills them. Is you've got this idea of the thing that's so terrible that it forever changes your mind when you look at it.
And the mangaka understands, obviously, that you can never depict it because you can't depict that without people going, that doesn't do anything. It's disturbing, but it's not enough to drive me over the edge. But yeah, I think Mostow, you needed that sense of Mostow changed at some point. And we don't get that at all. And then it's things like Patterson being ultimately the follow-up killer. It's a neat ending, but there's no hints before that, is there? That I can think of.
Not really, other than that he's the only other guest star in this episode who isn't dead.
Which Roger Ebert has a great comment on that, which is basically it's the law of conservative casting or something. I saw it referenced in, you remember The Snowman?
Yeah.
Basically, it's the whole you can deduce who the killer is because he's the only other major character in the film who isn't otherwise accounted for.
Yeah.
Come the end of it, so it gets, well, he's got to be the killer because there's no one else. Which I understand again from, this is a problem with visual mediums you don't get in books in the same way. Because you can have, it's easy to sort of hide a major character in amongst other characters in sort of scenes. Or, like, Clyde Bruckman, I suppose, is probably the other way of, you put the killer into loads of crowd scenes.
Yeah.
All the way through, even though you know up front he is the killer.
It's a lot easier in a book to make you assume that someone's in a place and you don't realise till the end that they've never been mentioned.
Yeah.
And things like that. You can't do it on the screen when you can always see them.
Yeah. But I think it's also, like, in terms of just, think of this in terms of Sherlock Holmes stories as well, which I know this isn't very much like Sherlock Holmes at all, but in terms of a mystery story, you as the audience can't possibly guess Patterson is the killer ahead of Mulder.
No.
No way of doing it at all.
Other than just the logical leap of it can't be anyone else.
Yeah.
You've got to buy immediately with the bite that Nemhauser is going to be the misdirect, therefore it has to be Patterson.
Yeah. Or, though, given the X-Files' pedigree, you could also say literal gargoyle thing could then show up and just start clawing people.
True.
But we don't get it either.
I think the thing the episode reminds me of most, and it's a bizarre one, and I wish it lent into it more, is 7.
Yeah.
It's more about the midpoint of 7 where they find John Doe's lair, and it's got his art and his journal and everything else, and you get that glimpse into his insanity and why he's killing people in the way he is.
Yes, well, yeah, he does. It is actually clearly laid out in his journals exactly what he's doing and why.
And you also get the idea of it's entrapment. I'm ruining a movie that's over 30 years old here, but it's still, in 7, it's kind of entrapment, and the main detective is part of his plan in the end. But this is getting into the main detective's head and making him part of this madness that drives him to be the essentially final killer of the thing. Which is what I wish this kind of fed into more this psychological aspect of it. Because the seeds are there and the tone's there, but we don't just quite go far enough, I feel.
Yeah, and we've got things along the way that just feel off. It's like Mulder handling the murder weapon. I get the whole, he's trying to get into the killer's head. Fair enough.
Which I'm sure you can still do while you're wearing gloves.
Exactly. I mean, he presumably would say, I need the tactile feel of the cold metal or something. At the same time, you're going, Mulder, this looks really dodgy. I mean, I'm pretty sure you could be fired from this, even if you're ultimately found not to have killed anyone for just tampering with evidence.
Mm.
And yeah, he's going to get away fine. I would say, actually, though, I think you highlighted the only really good scene in this is Skinner talking to Scully about if she's worried about Mulder, and he just says off the record.
So am I.
Yeah.
That's a really nice scene between them, actually.
It's great, and it's the first good scene we've had from Skinner for a while, I think, actually. He's been absent for a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good scene. It's just the rest of it. I think, actually, no, you also did find that there's a bizarre continuity error with Mulder's past in this episode now.
Oh, yeah. It's in Young at Heart. Young at Heart, Mulder mentions how he left the academy and he was immediately recruited by violent crimes, and the case that was the whole plot point in Young at Heart was the first one he ever worked on. Now he comes straight out of the academy and he's into whatever Patterson's unit is. I can't remember what they call Patterson's unit, but it's not violent crimes.
No.
It leans into Mulder better because it's more a unit that kind of focuses on psychoanalysis and stuff like that, which is Mulder's background. But at the same time, it's a really, really odd continuity error to make that Mulder has come straight out of the academy and apparently joined 2 separate units.
Yeah, I think the other thing, Patterson has specifically asked for Mulder to be on this case, although he won't admit it to Mulder, and he's done it through a roundabout way. Nemhauser conjectures that Patterson wants him to do it because he knows that Mulder will instinctually know how to solve it. But then the first thing Patterson says to Mulder when he sees him is, "Oh, is it aliens or Bigfoot or something?"
Mm.
No.
And keeps telling him how disappointed he is in him throughout the episode.
Yeah, it's a case of what.
I think, and the problem arises is the fact that it's another example of the X-Files not doing a very good job of presenting mental illness, which we've seen before. It was particularly in Oubliette that it really got on my nerves a bit about this. But in this one, the illness of the week is a dissociative disorder, which they're portraying as being the very typical movie split personality. and indeed the book kind of goes further with this, where there's a bit where Scully talks about how common split personalities are. Are they, though? Are they really that common? Because I'm pretty sure this is a thing that doesn't really happen, or at least hasn't been proven to happen in the way we see it in every movie ever. Your Session 9s, your splits, that sort of thing. But I suppose what we've got to accept is that this is the part of Patterson that wants to be caught is one personality. This is the part that's aware, and this has got Mulder on board. Whereas there is another part of Patterson that's not really aware of this, which is the contradictory Patterson we see that keeps saying, oh, why are you even here, Mulder? You've got these crazy theories about UFOs, you disappoint me, and all the rest of it. But that doesn't really kind of come together, and it's only something you can really extrapolate when you know how the episode ends.
Yeah, you're having to do the episode's work for it to make sense of how it fits together. And
I guess in a way it doesn't preclude possession, because possession often is something that killers cite. When they're going to plead insanity, it wasn't me, the devil made me do it. It's the common refrain of the person who's trying to plead insanity. So you've got, it could be that the devil or the gargoyle or whatever this thing is possessing this person, or he could be crazy.
And no, we're not going to say either way. In fact, I think Mosto, ultimately, we don't know what happened to him, other than he's allegedly going to get the death penalty.
If it's the state that does the death penalty.
Well, Scully says at the start.
Oh, does she?
Yeah. Which I didn't know Washington was actually into, to be honest. Because they're in Washington for this. But yeah, Mosto basically drops out the episode about the 3/4 mark and never comes back.
Instead, you just wind up with Patterson in his place.
Yeah, drawing his devil form on the wall.
I've got to question some of our facts about gargoyles in this episode as well. Because I've also been doing my gargoyle research, and I'm not sure what Mulder's been reading, to be honest.
Mulder's been reading exactly what the X-Files writers wanted him to read.
So, gargoyle, the word and the etymology comes exactly where you think it would. It's the French word, which is where we get the word gargle from, because they're water spouts.
Yes.
Whereas the grotesque is the kind of scary statue to ward off evil spirits that has the same kind of appearance as a gargoyle, but isn't a water spout. Mulder waxes on about them being, kind of guardians of the dead and warding off evil souls and stuff like that. And he goes on to a big speech about the gargoyle, which is, I think, Saint Romanus in the Bible fought this creature called the gargoyle, which was basically a dragon. And he, in the end, managed to decapitate it and tried to burn it, but discovered because it was a fire-breathing creature, he couldn't burn its head and neck. So mounted it on the wall of the castle to ward off evil spirits. Which is nothing like the description of the gargoyle that Mulder gives in the episode. But again, it's the kind of things that the concept of the gargoyle evidently came first, and this is our explanation of, that's why they look like little heads on the walls, because it represents the gargoyle, and all the rest of it. And not the other way around, like Mulder seems to have it, is that we think of gargoyles because of the gargoyle.
I suppose the other thing is they are trying quite heavily to make out, gargoyles could be part of the mystery.
Yeah.
And they're not.
No.
But
you get this kind of, admittedly this was first, but a bit like the Weeping Angels in Doctor Who, where Mulder keeps seeing gargoyles everywhere.
I was about to invoke Blink specifically as this is it done better, because you kept seeing the Weeping Angels around places. And that built into the ultimate threat when they're revealed. And
you also have the sting at the end of it, where it kind of shows you like a London cemetery, and you realise that statues like this are literally all around us.
Yeah. And that's the whole point of Blink, was the whole, yes, the characters have survived it, but, are you sure any of the statues around you is not a weeping angel that's going to send you back in time?
So now you've got to be scared of every statue you pass, which, if you live in London like Doctor Who has said, that's an awful lot of statues.
It feels like the gargoyle thing... I mean, an X-Files episode about a sentient gargoyle that's lurking on buildings and comes to life and kills you, like Gremlins 2, admittedly, but yeah, you could absolutely have gone in for that.
You also got a bit of Disney's Gargoyle there, with the fact that they're stone in the daytime and monsters at night.
Yeah, and you can't... I am left with the end of it thinking, ditch the Proto 7 thing you've got going and lean into your fantastical elements of the X-Files, and just have a gargoyle creature that's been hiding in plain sight all this time.
I'm going the other way. Lean in 7 more. Let's make it a psychological thriller episode. I like that.
That's right, okay, but we'll split it into 2 then. but not have this weird mishmash of both.
Apparently, Kin Manners considers this as one of the kind of starting points of Millennium as well. It was This and Irresistible are the episodes that kind of form the basis that Chris Carter built Millennium on, which will be something interesting to see later.
And on that note, if anyone has a opinion on whether we should do Millennium interspersed with season 4 of the X-Files and onwards, or we should leave it out the way and come to it much later.
Personally think separate it, but
see what people say. I am curious just because we've not watched Millennium at all, and it basically has nothing to do with the X-Files aside from a few crossovers.
There is one specific crossover episode of the X-Files, the Millennium. It says, where do people get Buffy-style reference books?
This was before Buffy, but it is very much... I've got to wonder if Buffy took that aspect of it, of the huge old tomes full of obscure knowledge that Mulder's been looking through.
You get them a lot in horror movies, though, anyway. But that book Mulder has is incredible. It doesn't even seem to have words, just loads of pictures of gargoyles.
But it is very much like the reference terms they keep bringing up in Buffy, and a lot of time, they sort of complain about how much time they spend researching things. And you do want to say, you must have an index of some kind, because you can't be working with this entire stack of books every time you're looking for supernatural menace.
I have a great collection of supernatural books upstairs from when I was going through my teenage into Buffy years and stuff like that. I was always disappointed that you never got them in the leather-bound with the gold embossed vampire on the front sort of appearance, as the Buffy reference books do not exist in this form.
I mean, in some ways you could say it's, the really rare, like, monastic books, the hand-copied manuscript kind of things.
And not like my really battered copy of The Golden Bough upstairs, which of course is not rare and valuable.
No, it's just got a copyright page and an index in the back. I think it's a visual flair that unfortunately doesn't really happen in real life in the same way. At the same time, probably a good thing, because researching that kind of level of book is not going to be quick or easy.
But cooler.
It is cooler. It's true.
I do also think we oversimplify a lot with our very, very hammy pontifications on madness in this episode, because we've kind of gone the niche route of, although I don't think we ever expressively purloin the very quoted niche when you gaze into the abyss in there, is that's what we're getting at.
Yeah.
There's a lot of, if you want to catch a monster, you've got to become one. To understand an artist, you must see his art. These, if you gaze into the abyss gazes back sort of quotes.
It does make you wonder why you didn't actually just put the Nietzsche quote in there. Was it just too obvious?
But we've essentially paraphrased it in about 5 different ways throughout the episode. And it is one of the most quoted philosophical lines at all points. It's, even if you can't attribute it to Nietzsche, you've heard that quote before, because it's so overdone.
It's very odd. That's definitely what they're trying to get at, but they just don't.
I felt it was a bit ham-fisted as well when we've mentioned it several times throughout the episode, and still we have to have a closing narration from Mulder that just says exactly the same thing again.
We've had a few of those of late, and they haven't worked the last few times we've had them.
Hey, in case you haven't noticed already, we're getting at the fact that Patterson has gazed into the abyss so far he's become a monster himself. Did you get that? Huh? Did you get it?
I suppose that's the other kind of complaint, is that you don't get a sense that Patterson has, succumbed over time. It's kind of the whole, he's just hit this one, and that's him screaming over the edge into the abyss.
Just catching him has kind of been the trigger that's caused him to kind of take on the mantle.
Yeah, and it feels unsatisfying. Again, this could be one of these contenders for 45 minutes isn't enough time, but an hour and a half is too long.
Mm.
You need a middle-range episode to handle some of these themes, or you need to go and really rewrite it at an earlier stage.
I do feel you needed more clue that it was Patterson. As you said earlier, there is absolutely nothing beyond the fact that he's the only character it can possibly be.
Yeah, you're given no opportunity to figure this out before Mulder does.
Mm. Whereas a good mystery would have when it was revealed, you'd realise that the clues were there the whole time.
Yes, well, I think there's a video about Sherlock Holmes by H. Bomber Guy on YouTube, and he describes it as how you read mystery stories and how you read things like Arthur Conan Doyle stories, is you can read through it and not have any idea of what it's all leading to, but then Sherlock Holmes lays out the clues and you go, oh, I understand the logic of how you got there.
You have the Agatha Christie idea as well, is the fact that it's always written straight and then enough clues are changed to misdirect you as to who the killer will be.
But the appeal of them is that you can either try and figure out ahead of time, or when they lay it out, it all makes sense. The point in the video, though, was that Stephen Moffat, when writing the Sherlock Holmes TV series, deliberately didn't do that and would then sort of just omit clues or have late-on revelations, so there's no way for you to understand it. And it's that difference in attitudes, and the X-Files, this episode of the X-Files, unfortunately, is falling onto the whole, we need to do a mystery, we're not going to play fairly with that mystery.
I think if an example of going well, and unfortunately it probably requires you go to London, is go and see The Mousetrap.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
The Mousetrap is an excellent example of the fact that the clues are there the whole time, but don't come together until the final act.
Yeah, and that we almost got it, but we stumbled because we thought we'd come up with an interesting alternate way of solving this mystery, not realising we stumbled into the exact right solution, but dismissed it because it couldn't possibly be that.
Yeah, but we won't reveal anymore because part of the brotherhood of seeing The Mousetrap is you're not allowed to tell people what happened.
Exactly.
So if you're ever in London, go see The Mousetrap. That's how you write a mystery well, and how you conceal your killer well as well.
There's enough clues to get it in the first half if you're in the right frame of mind.
Yep, absolutely. Which unfortunately is not what you get in this episode.
No. Do we have anything else for Grotesque?
No, I think we've about covered everything.
Next week we have Piper Maru and Apocrypha.
Yeah. I'm not so good at remembering conspiracy episodes, as we've all noted already, but I do actually remember liking these ones, so I'm quite excited.
Yes. This one, actually, I will say I remember really liking this one. Yeah, can't comment on what's going to come out of this one, because that's for way further down the line when things get messy. But no, these two episodes I think are very good. Yeah, we'll get to that next week. If you'd like to get hold of us, our email address is thingsargettingstrange42@gmail.com.
Alternatively, you can contact us via social media. On Twitter and Tumblr, we are GetStrange42. On Mastodon, we are at GetStrange42@universadon.com. And on Facebook, you can find us by searching for Things Are Getting Strange and X-Files Rewatch Podcast.
We have Patreon, patreon.com/thingsargettingstrange, where we are doing a Let's Play of the X-Files game. Episode 2 of that should be coming shortly. Nobody said that last week, but things have been complicated, but hopefully that'll be up shortly.
Yeah, we're having a good time playing through it. We're hoping to get episodes of that up more regularly. We had a rough couple of weeks, as you're probably aware from the Twitter, but we're getting back into things now.
Our theme music is Envision by Kevin MacLeod. You can find that on incompetech.com, licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Thank you all for listening, and until next week, remember, hate him.
Hate him.
Wouldn't want to date him.